Hello, welcome to Houston VR. I see some new faces, I see some familiar faces. Appreciate everyone coming out. It's haunted. We've been doing this every month for about 11 and a half years over a number of different locations, and thank you very much to HCC for hosting us. We really appreciate that. We have a YouTube channel where we've been archiving these recordings. If you scan the QR code, it'll take you to our channel. We tend to post, individual videos for the different speakers and then sort of an overall video for the whole meetup. So, hey Ted. Hey. So, we've had a lot of different guests out to speak over the years, aerospace, gaming, medicine, all sorts of things. We've also done a lot of outreach. I'm not sure why that slide didn't come through. Last month we had the X Arcade controller for VR pinball, and they were announcing the upgrade kit. That is now available for pre-orders. It's $150 on top of the main thing, and you have to do a little of the assembly yourself, but I suspect it's going to be extremely cool. I liked it a lot, even as it was, and adding in the pinball plunger and the haptics and the solenoids is going to really take it to the next level. So I'm hoping somebody will get it and we can play with it. Nintendo officially released a Virtual Boy adapter for the Switch, and Switch 2 does not work with the Switch Lite. There's emulators on all the headsets, so unless you just want kind of the nostalgia value of it, there's probably not a lot to it. They said they're also going to release a cardboard version of it for like super cheap.
This was a head scratcher.
Yes, I'm surprised, but it's fun. I know the Virtual Boy had its adherents. So big screen, the Big Screen Beyond 2 is shipping fabulous headset, super lightweight. It feels like styrofoam. It's so lightweight. So, but no integrated audio. And the Valve Index has the best audio of any headset I've ever had. It's got these off-the-ear drivers that have they don't put any pressure on your ears. The audio quality is fantastic. So they are creating an adapter, Project Beyond X, to allow you to use the strap and the speakers from the Index with the Beyond and the Beyond 2, which is just a really cool thing. It's a little pricey, $109 for an adapter, but if you're looking for absolutely the best, we used to use the Deluxe Audio strap with the Rift and or the Quest and create the Franken mod, but this is kind of the same thing with the Big Screen Beyond.
Does the tube form to your face like the one does? I know it was custom.
No, they don't do a custom scan. It just has sort of a more generic facial interface. So on the positive, it's a lot more generic. You can share it amongst your friends instead of it being crafted specifically just to you. But some of the adjustments are not super easy. It can adjust the IPD, the distance between the pupils, but you have to do it with a hex wrench. So it's it's still not super friendly for sharing. But Apple, they just released the newest Vision OS. It's been in beta for a little bit. It finally made it out. There's a lot of really cool things in there. I'm not going to spend a ton of time going through it all, but a lot of collaborative stuff like sharing, watching videos together, team device management. It's compatible now with the PlayStation VR 2 controllers. There's not a lot of games that support that yet, but there are some. But kind of the big thing is they greatly upgraded their personas. So the one on the left is kind of the newest. They bought a company, they did more upgrades. It's really getting to the point where it's crossing to the other side of the uncanny valley. I've had extended conversations with people via their personas, and it really does feel like talking to them. It doesn't feel artificial. So I tried joining meetings early on with it, and it wasn't very good. I mean, if I started laughing, my mouth laughed, but my eyes didn't, and people got creeped out. So, but they've made big strides on that. We're also expecting to see a new Vision Pro. It's just a minor incremental update. They use an M5 chip instead of the M2, and has an improved strap. That should be out probably later this year or early next year. Valve. This is the news that I was just waiting all day to see it drop, and it didn't drop yet, because I know a bunch of people are in Seattle who should have been at Oculus Connect and aren't, which means that Valve is demoing something, and it's almost certainly Deckard. We've seen news on Deckard I went back through my presentations, at least 5 years they've been working on it, at least. I stopped looking at that point. And we are expecting to see it this year. It's looking like it's going to be called the Steam Frame. Notably, they're branding it Steam rather than Valve, and that is actually kind of a vote of confidence. They're putting it with their flagship brand. They're clearly thinking this has some real potential. Sadly, it's Bradley. Brad Lynch is the guy that has been following this like a hawk forever. Every time they put out a new Steam VR release, he decompiles it and string busts it and checks all the things to see the latest. And he said over the last week, they've updated it all. Hey, come on in. They've been updating it to rename all their overlays frames. And a lot of the stuff that used to say engineering validation or prototype no longer does. So it's looking like they're rolling out drivers that are ready for it right now. We're expecting it to be standalone capable, like a Quest, based on a Qualcomm chip, like a Quest, probably the latest Qualcomm chip, but have inside-out tracking, much like the Quest, unlike all of their previous stuff that used the base stations, the Lighthouse base stations. It's really, really hard to know with Valve because they have a very active R&D division. And I know there were at least 8 or 10 devices that passed through it that arguably could have become Deckard. And we don't really know exactly which one did. There were some of them that actually had the infrared photodiodes on them so that they would be backwards compatible with the Lighthouse system if you wanted to use it. But we don't know if that's making it out. But we do know it does have inside-out tracking. There's a dedicated Wi-Fi 6E dongle for wireless streaming. I don't know if they've gone the same route as in the past with like full quality tethered stuff with like a display port. Unsure on that. We do know that devs are being paid to port their Quest software to it, which is pretty cool. And Valve has unbelievable amounts of money. They're very, very rich. So they're fully capable of pushing this and paying the money for the R&D and for the devs to port things. Nevertheless, it looks like they're still pricing the hardware kind of like they did the Index, right around $1,000 or so. So this is a sort of a niche hobbyist thing as opposed to a mass consumer item. But the Index was one of my favorite headsets of all time. It with the fit and finish, the quality was just unbelievable on almost everything about it. So I'm excited to see what they're coming out with. Meta, of course, this is the big news this month. Meta Connect was yesterday, started yesterday, continued on to today. We saw a lot of announcements. Most of them were not directly VR related. A lot of things with smart glasses, but a lot of the smart glasses stuff is forward looking towards augmented reality glasses. The Ray-Ban display is what they're calling the newest ones that actually have a small integrated display in the field of view. It is super bright. They haven't said what technology they're using, but I've heard rumors that they're actually using lasers fed into the waveguide because they can get to 5,000 nits on it. And also the lenses are transitional, so when you're outside, you get a little dimming, which also helps. $800, which I mean, it's a lot higher than their lowest end Ray-Bans, which are about $300, but you have like the Oakleys at $500, so it's really not that much more than some of their higher end ones. And it's certainly better than the rumors we had of $1,000 or $1,500. So I've talked to a couple of people who have used them and said they are very good. I will say that they had a number of technical issues with them when they were demoing on stage, some of them fairly embarrassing. May have a few rough edges to sand off before it becomes kind of a polished product. One of the most notable things, and this is one that definitely looks forward towards the AR glasses, is they have an electromyographic bracelet that you put on that senses the electrical impulses in your muscles so that it can track your hand motions even when your hands are out of sight. So it doesn't have to have line of sight to your hands. So you can do really tiny gestures, micro gestures, which is nice because right now with the Meta Ray-Bans, a lot of the stuff you have to do vocally. You have to say, Meta, do this. And this means that you can do things silently. You can be looking something up or starting translation if you're talking to someone who doesn't speak English. And the cool thing is, it will actually subtitle it in English, or you could bring up a recipe or instructions and have it visible. So these are very, very cool. And this is something they've also been showing off with their full AR headsets or glasses like the Orion. So this is the first time they've rolled it out. This is actually something that has a long history. This is the IMYO, which is the grandfather of it. We actually had these people out in like 2015, and they gave one of these away at the Meetup. And this is the great granddaddy, and it works exactly the same. They've just really slimmed down the form factor and made it more comfortable and more stylish.
The writing too.
Yeah, I'll get to that in a little bit, but yeah, you can actually do text input with it, which they were showing like 30, 35 words a minute with Zuckerberg. He said some of the people in the office were up higher than that. That's not as high as some of the other techniques they've used. They've gotten up like over 100 words per minute. But the nice thing is you don't have to have a desk or whatever. You can just kind of be scribbling. The same technology they use, this is an aside, I'm not going to go into it very deeply, but that same electromyography where you're sensing the electrical impulses in the muscles, there's a company called Alter Ego that's using that. You put something like this actually that sits back behind your ears, and it's sensing the electrical impulses to your jaw and your tongue and so forth. And you can do what's called subvocalization, which is basically you think about what you're going to say and you sort of almost go through the motions of saying it, but without actually vocalizing. It's called subvocalization. It takes a little bit of practice, but you can actually dictate that way. You can type. So there's no sound coming out, but you're typing. It looks like telepathy. It's very cool. I've seen people messing with it before, but it looks like they're actually bringing a product to market. But it's neat. This is kind of a moment for this technology where you're seeing maybe ways it could be integrated into these things. So I pulled in a couple of their videos. These are Ray-Ban display glasses. And you can see the display itself is relatively small. It's only covering about 20 degrees of your field of view. And really it's only 600 pixels by 600 pixels, but in that small space, that's actually pretty dense. It's a pretty crisp image for that. And you see he's doing the hand gestures there, like he grabbed and twisted to adjust the volume or to zoom in or zoom out on a photograph, things like that. So, and here we go, the bracelet. He's using it, micro gestures to scroll between things. So it's a lot like what the Apple Vision Pro does with the micro gestures, but you can do it completely, by your side, behind your back, whatever. You don't have to have line of sight, which is really nice. Here it's showing, taking a photograph. He's actually, framing the photograph, taking the picture, choosing automatic responses for text messages, following instructions on Google Maps, things like that. So there's some really cool uses. Also doing like live translation of text. So if you're in another country and you're looking at the menu and you want it translated, you can just translate it into your native language. So also it will subtitle things people are saying, which is great for people who have hearing impairments. But it will also translate them to your native language if someone's speaking not in your native language. One thing I didn't put a slide in for, there's something called conversation focus, which if you're looking at someone and having a conversation with them, you can kick it into conversation focus mode. It will dim everyone else's voices and enhance their voice so you can hear it more clearly, which is great because I actually have a lot of problems with that in crowded environments. That's actually very tempting to me. There's something called Live AI, which is their assistant, which basically you give the AI permission to use the cameras. So it can see what you're seeing and to give it context. Obviously, there's huge privacy implications, especially with a company that treats you as the commodity that they're trying to sell. So I wish it was a different company. Apple's a little better with privacy, for example, but it was neat. The concept was, he was standing in front of all these ingredients and you look down and it identified all the ingredients and said, okay, can I make this type of sauce? And it's going on there. It had some technical problems, were very AI. It was convinced he'd completed a step he hadn't and he couldn't convince it that he hadn't. And so they blamed the Wi-Fi, which was funny, and kept going.
Well, in fairness, he did cut it off halfway through the first step.
He did, he interrupted it.
So who knows what would happen if he let it finish.
Right. They are opening this up for developers, so you can write applications for the wearables. I'm excited about that. Looking at it and kind of reading between the lines, I think you're having to code pretty close to bare metal, probably in C. So it's not something where you're building stuff in Unity or Unreal, but you can build your own apps, which I'm excited about and makes me much more interested in the glasses. On the VR side, they had a few announcements. The engine that underpins their Horizon Worlds, they rewrote from scratch, closer to bare metal, moved it off of Unity. So it got a 4 times speed increase from that, and they can now have up to 100 concurrent users in a space. Also, they're adding in a lot more in the way of AI to help you construct environments. You can just say, I need a skybox that looks like this. I need a house that looks like this, and have it build all of those things. They are in the process of adding agentic AI to, it was unclear whether that was to the development process or actually things you could like bring in and give NPCs, you know, conversational capabilities, something like that.
Seemed pretty heavy on the development.
It really did seem to lean on the development, so that's probably it.
MCP server for it too.
Yeah. So last year at Connect, they showed off something called Meta Hyperscape, which was environments captured using Gaussian splats or rendered using Gaussian splats, which we did a whole meeting on at one point. But the upshot is it's a way to capture hyper-realistic environments that even handle things like transparency and reflections and so forth. And they had promised at the time that they would let you capture your own environments and bring them into VR. And we heard absolutely nothing about it until yesterday. And then they said, we're bringing that live. And it's very cool. Basically, you say you're going to scan an environment, and it does the sort of mesh scanning over the whole thing. And then you have to get close to all of these meshes, and they'll disappear as you have enough data on that area. So you sort of like, it scans the whole area in a few seconds, but then maybe over the course of 5 or 10 minutes, you walk around up close and like get the scan of everything. Then that all uploads to a server, and they chew on it for a couple hours. And then you can see your environment. I believe it's still being done the same way where it's cloud rendered, which means you need a pretty good net connection to see it, but you can have photoreal environments that you've captured, and it sounds like these will eventually also be shared environments where you could like say capture your living room, and then you could invite people into your living room to watch a movie with you or play a game with you, which would be very cool. I'd love to invite some of my friends over to watch a movie or play some Mario Kart. That would be a lot of fun. So it's a neat thing. They're rolling out a new home environment that's based off of this revamped Horizon Worlds engine. It allows you to have widgets and things, so you can like, you know, dock Instagram photos and all sorts of things in the environment, and they're persistent. And it will also become social over time. You'll be able to invite people in and share the environment, which is pretty cool. From what I've heard, I have not yet, if you force it to firmware 81 on the public test channel, you can test it out. It hasn't gone wide yet. From people I've talked to, they said it's beautiful. Said it's a really beautiful environment. And you can kind of, the home is consistent, but you can choose the different environments around the home, and it actually like adjusts the lighting and the shadows and everything to match it. 79, which is I believe the latest firmware that's rolled out generally, they have dramatically improved the quality of pass-through that goes to development apps. Yes, I see Jake over there being thankful. Because yeah, I mean, this has nothing to do with the quality of the pass-through that you're seeing as the end user. It has everything to do with the quality of the images that are being passed to a developer in their application. If you look at like the quality of the lines here versus here, you see there's a dramatic improvement. So that's going to be a lot more useful for people doing work with that, as Jake did and demoed like at one of the more recent meetups. So looking at all of this, all the stuff they've announced, all the stuff they've demoed, what's next? What's coming? And there's 3 things that we have to go on for that. One is public statements, either like official announcements or like Bosworth does Ask Me Anythings on Reddit, you know, stuff like that. Second is leaks, people string busting the drivers or you know, little bits of information leaking out from partner devs. And the third is prototypes. I will say that of all of those, prototypes are the ones that strike me as the most notable, because you can say something, but if you are throwing millions or billions of dollars at building prototypes of something, you're clearly interested enough in bringing it to market that you know, you're engaged, you're committed. Now, not every prototype produces a feature that comes to market, obviously, but it meant that they wanted to try it and they think it had the potential to come to market. So they've done a lot of prototypes over this. It was actually from a few years ago. This is their wall of prototypes. They build a prototype, they do a bunch of testing, and then they put it up on the wall. And I know what maybe half, maybe 2/3 of those are, but some of those I have no idea what they are. There's some pretty wild ones up there. I've kind of zoomed way in and speculated about a lot of them. And prototypes cover a lot of territory. I mean, you've got like the completely duct taped together. This is literally, they call it the duct tape prototype, the original Rift prototype. Just purely proof of concept. Does this work at all? And a lot of stuff looks just like this. I mean, prototypes frequently are cobbled together. They got wires everywhere. They're not an end user product. They're just trying to demonstrate a feature, test a feature, see if it's viable, see if they can bring it closer to production. So you see like a lot of things that look like this. They're pretty wild. The other end of the spectrum is sort of a look and feel prototype. This is not a functional item at all. HoloCake doesn't exist, but they built a model of this is what we want a headset to look like in, say, 5, 6, 7 years. As thin as a pair of glasses, you know, using kind of like different, I mean, it's an aspirational creation. So looking forward, we're almost the end of 2025. What are we looking at in 2026? Originally, the Quest 4 was supposed to ship in the fourth quarter of 2026. That has been pushed to late 2027, which would normally make me unhappy. But there's a few reasons why I may be okay with this. It's a bunch of trade-offs. And one of the reasons is they seem to be opening up space in their timeline for a different type of HMD, a different type of VR headset. Right now it seems to be codenamed Phoenix. Previously it was Puffin. There's something called Luma that may be associated with it. I think that may be the name of the computing puck. It's hard to know. These prototype names change a lot. And that appears to be what's scheduled for late 2026. There will also be a bunch of incremental improvements to the Meta Ray Bans. The Meta Ray Bans are selling really, really well. The adoption curve on them is doing the hockey stick thing. So clearly, it's a different world than when we launched Google Glass and people were very upset about Google Glass and the privacy implications. That ship has sailed. People are aware they no longer have privacy in public, unfortunately. So people are no longer as worked up about it. And the Meta Ray Bans are doing very well. So this was an early prototype of Puffin, the headset. And it looks form factor wise just like a pair of sunglasses, except it's completely opaque. It's just blacked out. They are not optical. There's not a clear lens you can see through the way you would with a standard AR headset. It is pass-through. It has cameras on the front and it's rendering everything to a video screen. And in a way that seems ridiculous. You know, you're going to a lot of trouble to go from this side to this side by capturing everything and then re-rendering it, going through a whole processing engine. But the reason is, in AR, they've had tremendous difficulty widening out the field of view so that the augmented elements cover the whole field of view. And that has a lot to do with the optical properties of the waveguides that they're using. And we'll get into that a little bit later. They're making some progress on that, but if you want something that covers your full field of view, at the moment you're still going to need pass-through AR. So this is a VR headset, but it's a VR headset that's designed to be socially acceptable. You know, it looks like you're just wearing a pair of sunglasses. And it's lightweight, it's compact, so hopefully not fatiguing to wear for an entire day. And that's the whole point. It is mostly focused on productivity or media consumption. So I'm sitting down in front of my laptop at a cafe and I would like to have a couple of giant screens with me so I can do work properly. I can do that. Or I'm sitting on an airplane and I would like to watch, you know, a movie in 4K on a 100-inch screen. Okay, I can do that. And people aren't looking at me too weird because it just kind of looks like I'm wearing a pair of glasses. So, and we've seen some images that have come out of Meta that aspire in that direction. This is kind of a proof of concept here of, you know, they had this whole virtual workspace, the concept that they were playing with for a while. And Apple tried to go this direction with the Apple Vision Pro. And from a technical point of view, it did very well. And it was very capable. The problem is, and this is as someone who has this headset, it is stinking heavy. It is really uncomfortable to wear for an extended period of time. And you can throw a whole bunch of adapters and straps and so on it to make it a little less cumbersome, but then at that point it looks ridiculous, even more ridiculous. And even still, it's pretty heavy. Another competitor that was trying to move into that space was the immersed visor. And that was their whole pitch was, looks like a pair of sunglasses. You can watch giant TV. You can have giant monitors wherever you go. I was at the Immersed IRL event when they unveiled it, and it completely failed to function. It was very embarrassing. So I have emailed them every few months and said, hey, whenever you have something to demo, let me know. I will come to you and I will demo it. They've stopped responding to my emails, so we'll see. Maybe they'll come around. I don't think they like the article I wrote about them very much. I thought I was very fair, considering nothing worked. But so it goes. But this is like some of their marketing materials where they're showing someone at a cafe or a co-working space with like a giant monitor virtually. Or you're sitting on your couch and watching something. And I will say, putting on the Apple Vision Pro, the quality for watching a 4K movie is unbelievable. I mean, so much better than any of the equipment I have in my house. And if I like lay down on my bed and stretch it out over top of me so that the weight is less of an issue, I can watch a whole movie that way and it's great. So I like the idea, and especially if it's something like a sunglasses form factor, you throw it on, that becomes a lot more interesting. So I do believe there is a market for something that meets that need for media consumption and for productivity. Whether you can get the form factor and the quality and the price where you need it to be to make that happen, I don't know, but they are trying for it. It was kind of funny because I was in line at the Immersed event and ended up recognizing someone who was on the Puffin team from Meta. And so that was interesting. They clearly were very interested in what Immersed was up to because they were busily up to the same thing. So, all right, moving from that's 2026. Incremental updates to the Ray-Bans and then whatever they're going to call this Phoenix prototype. 2027, that is when we should see the Quest 4, potentially, late 2027. We'll also see more incremental improvements to the Ray-Bans. I wouldn't be surprised if they did something with a stereoscopic display, because right now, the Ray-Ban display, it's only in one eye, which is going to feel a little ghostly because you're seeing something in one eye but not the other. And then Bosworth talked about the fact it's actually very difficult to get the convergence and alignment and everything perfect so that everything looks correct. And of course, they did it with Orion. It can be done. But now you're talking about two displays, so higher weight, higher power consumption, higher cost. So I understand why they went with like a single display one, but if they can ramp things up to bring the cost down, having something that was stereo correct would be nice. And if that's going to happen, I would expect it probably to happen in 2027.
What are the incremental updates to the Quest?
Well, that's what we're going to get to right now, the Quest 4. And this is, of course, like a completely made-up render that someone did. We have no idea what it'll look like. But what, based on the public statements and the leaks and the prototypes and so forth, should we expect from the Quest 4? And I'm kind of going through from things that are very likely to things that are less likely. The very high probability expectations. Number one, they're going to try to keep the low-end version of it at that $399 price point or below. They have discovered that it is a very price-sensitive thing. It sells way better below certain price thresholds, so they want to keep it accessible at those price thresholds. And that's a lot of why you saw the split between the 3S and the 3. There are things they want to do that they can't do at that price point, but they still want to have something that is functional at that price point for people who want it. So that's why you have the Quest 3 and the Quest 3S. And the Quest 3 and the Quest 3S are, and that's the kind of thing we're talking about here, they are functionally identical. If you, as a developer, are writing software, you do not have to worry about whether someone has a Quest 3 or a Quest 3S. The Quest 3 is a significantly nicer piece of hardware for a lot of reasons. It's got higher resolution displays, it's got pancake lenses, so it's more compact and it has a better form factor. And it's got a higher resolution screen, things like that, but none of those actually affect the core functionality. They're running the same chip, they have the same pass-through capabilities, so there's nothing that you can do on the Quest 3 that you can't do on the 3S, and I expect that to continue, because when you fragment the market, it makes it very hard for developers, and developers tend not to support the high-end features, and you saw that with the Quest Pro. The Quest Pro had a bunch of features that were really cool that got no developer support because it's split. You'd have to do a separate, development path for the Quest Pro to support them. So I think they're going to try to avoid that as much as possible. All the key specs are going to be bumped up significantly. You're going to see a 2 times or more increase in GPU performance. You're going to see higher resolution screens. You're going to see higher quality pass-through. These are all effectively given, and they're almost gimmies too. I mean, the chips that come out every year are faster and lower power consumption. The screens that come out are higher resolution. So they just sort of get those for free by virtue of doing nothing. Those come to them. And so if you look at like the Quest 3 versus the Quest 2, the GPU was a little over double on the performance. CPU, they'd claimed like a 1/3 increase, and really it was sort of dynamic, and it varied between just slightly better and maybe a quarter better. But you're typically GPU bottlenecked other than draw calls, which is getting way more technical than we want to go today. But so you really want to push the GPU. That's where we're hurting. Per eye resolution, you can see the jump from Quest 2 to Quest 3, but also take a look at the Apple Vision Pro. There's a lot of headroom here for them to bump up the resolution. And one thing we have noticed about Meta is it is easy to shame them. They like being the best on the market, and it really hurts their pride when they're not. And when the Apple Vision Pro came out, you saw Zuckerberg come out with a real chip on his shoulder trying to explain why the Quest 3 was actually better than this $3,500 piece of hardware, which was absurd on almost every level. But he really wants to have the best. And so I think you're going to see a significant bump up in resolution. Probably not quite to this level, because the Apple Vision Pro is basically packing the entire high-end laptop to drive that, but you're going to see a significant bump up. Also in the pass-through. That's one of the things, like if you looked at the Quest 2, the pass-through was terrible. It was never really intended for pass-through. It was for positional tracking and room setup. And then the Quest Pro was almost usable. I mean, it was acceptable, but it didn't look very good. And the Quest 3 looked better, but it does not look anywhere near as good as, say, an Apple Vision Pro. Apple Vision Pro is gorgeous on pass-through, other than a little bit of motion blur, which I do hold against them. So if they ship 2 different SKUs, which I expect them to, but there's no guarantee. They might collapse back down to 1 depending on the market and so on. But if they have 2, the higher end one is definitely going to have either pancake lenses or some other type of compact optics. The lower end one may or may not, depending on whether they want that as a differentiating feature. One of the ways they kept the cost low on the Quest 3S is it is basically, in a lot of functional ways, a Quest 2. You can roll off the same assembly lines. It's using a lot of the same parts. It's using the same screens. It's using the same optics and so forth. So that helps keep the cost down, because all of those things have already been scaled over time and the costs have come down. I would not be shocked if they continued that, because a lot of people just don't care. They don't need the slimmer form factor and the higher res screens. They just want to play games on it, and they want to play games on it at a reasonable price. So they may well continue to do the same thing with the optics. So those are all things I would classify as all but guaranteed. You can pretty much take these to the bank. Here's talking about pancake lenses versus like waveguides, other compact, because there's other compact optics that they've been playing with. The negative with pancake lenses, you'll see this, where they're bouncing, it's using multiple lenses, and it's bouncing the image back and forth between them to simulate a larger distance. It's folding the space. But with each bounce, you throw away 50% of your light. So that is producing a lot of heat, it's drawing a lot of energy, and it's dimming your screen. So there's a lot of reasons not to like pancake lenses, but they have done some beautiful things with their optical stack. The Quest 3 has some of the best optics on the market. The optics are actually better in the Quest 3 than on the Apple Vision Pro, which is a $3,500 product. So I give them full credit on that. But I wouldn't be shocked if they went to another type of compact system. So medium probability expectations. They kind of came at it a different direction this time. They came out the Quest 3, and it was significantly more expensive than the Quest 2. And then they saw that it was very price sensitive, so they came out with the Quest 3S at the lower end. And I think they've realized that the 3S, the lower end, is their mainstream SKU. There's what they call SKUs in the market. It's just they're different versions. And so if that's the one that's really going to move inventory, then that gives them some room to maybe push that high end up a little bit if they can have features that justify it. People who are going to buy a Quest 3 or the higher end Quest 4, these are connoisseurs. These are people who have used VR before. They know they want these higher end features, and they might be willing to pay an extra $100, $150, $200 if the features justify it. Now, I don't think it's going to go over $1,000 because they tried launching the Quest Pro at $1,500, which was ridiculous. They moved it down to $1,000, and people still didn't feel like the incremental features justified the price difference. So you got to have compelling features, and really, I'm thinking maybe $800, $850 is where it tops out on what people are probably willing to pay. But if you look at like the Valve Index and so on, a lot of hobbyists are willing to pay $1,000. I just don't know that that's where Meta wants to be. So There are lots of hints that eye tracking is a priority for them on this next headset. Partially for social uses, when you're doing social things in VR, being able to make eye contact, it's a fundamentally human thing. That's how we connect with each other. And not being able to make eye contact makes everything feel very sort of like you're talking to a mannequin. Whereas if you actually make eye contact, that's meaningful. And if you can get high enough quality eye tracking, you can do foveated rendering, and we'll talk about that in a little bit. But it's probable, I would suspect, that the eye tracking may end up only in the high-end headsets, because you can fall back to not having eye tracking and it'll work fine. I mean, you can just not be making eye contact with people. You could not be doing foveated rendering, which is going to hurt your performance, but if you have a lower resolution screen, you're probably fine anyway. So that's something that may well be a differentiating feature, is eye tracking. And this is something that's actually a lot more difficult than you would think. When Michael Abrash did his predictions at one point, he was talking about the fact that everything they thought would take 5 years took 3, except eye tracking, which at that point had taken 7, and they still weren't happy with it. So eye tracking is difficult because everybody's eyes are a little different. You have people with a lazy eye, you have people with a damaged pupil, things like that. And also eyes move really, really fast. So you got to have really high-end cameras to capture that at a good frame rate and a good accuracy for things like foveated rendering. So you'll see, you put IR illuminators around the edges of it, and then usually 2 cameras in there, 1 for each eye. Different headsets have different solutions, but that's kind of the core of it. And one thing it allows you to do is what they call heat mapping. You know exactly where someone is looking. And for certain things like, product, or for like training or for marketing, that's a really useful thing to know. Also, as I said, for social uses, it's huge. It's incredibly important. So if and only if codec avatars are deemed likely to ship at some point during the Quest 4's lifespan, you will probably see face tracking, at least on the high-end one. And that's so that you can do social things and have it. As someone who has used the Apple Vision Pro, where you can actually have conversations with people with your avatar and it feels natural, this is something they've been trying since the very early days. I mean, these were adapters they had on the DK2 and so on. But the people who are really doing it right is Apple. Apple Vision Pro has beautiful avatars that really do cross the other side of the uncanny valley. And I think they would very much like to do that too. So we'll get back to that with codec avatars in a bit. Foveated rendering support is the other reason you want eye tracking. And here's the thing. Your eye only sees in full detail over about 1 to 2 degrees at the very center. And then you got the parafoveal region that's 2 to 5 degrees more, that you get kind of like so-so image. And then beyond that, there's peripheral, and then beyond that, you're just getting rods. There's no cones at all. So you can see contrast, you can see motion. That's about it. Honestly, your brain is lying to you about everything out here. It just remembered what's there and it sketches. It's like, whatever you saw over there is probably still there. I'm just going to pretend it is. And there's ways to test this, and they're really freaky. You can, look at something and then look over here and change something and have no awareness that it's changed. Your brain will say, this is still a brick wall, and then you look back and it's not. There's really cool ways to test that. But that's because the only place in your entire eye that has a high density of cones is the fovea, and it's this tiny, tiny little spot back there. So the trick is they're rendering everything on the screen at full resolution in case you happen to be looking at it, when really they only need to render about 1 to 2 degrees, ideally, at full resolution, and then kind of an area around that at maybe 60% res, and then everything around that you get down to like about 20%. You do have to be careful. It's not quite that simple because we are sensitive to contrast and motion. Things like aliasing that cause like pops out there, you will pick up on that. So they actually have to do some clever things out there to avoid that. But the basic thing is, if your eye tracking is good enough, you only really have to render a couple of degrees at full resolution. Now, good enough is a very high bar. So we've only seen a couple of headsets. The PSVR 2 does foveated rendering. There were a handful of games that did it for the Quest Pro.
Red Matter.
Yeah, Red Matter 2 did it. So, but the cameras that you need, they need to be super high res, they need to have super high frame rate, they need to be super accurate. And all of those things are expensive, difficult to do, compact, at the low power draw, all these things. So this is the thing that's really making it hard. And that is one of the things I was going to say is one of the things that might have prompted them to push it out by a year was to give themselves more time to get that right. And if that got it over the line, by all means, push it back a year, because foveated rendering is going to be a game changer. You want this like retina level resolution, everywhere. You want stuff to look as real life, but there's no way that a standalone processor is going to be able to render all that. The only way that's going to happen is if you do foveated rendering. Very likely, much as with the Quest 3 versus the 3S, the high-end SKU is likely to have a somewhat higher quality screen, better contrast, better color, and so forth. And we've seen screens progress a lot just in the last few years. I had a slide that I had pulled in from an old presentation that was talking about the limits of OLEDs for color representation. And at the time it had said there was like no way to get over, I think it was 85% of the P3 color space with an OLED. And that's not true anymore. They like QD OLEDs and all sorts of things, and multicolor backlit LEDs, stuff like that. So the best OLED on the market right now is at 99.3% of the P3 color space. And the Quest 3 is at about 73. So there's a lot of headroom for better color accuracy and richer colors. Now, we're going out here, okay, that was with the sort of the medium probability things. Now we're in the lower probability things. Higher field of view is a production-ready feature. They have prototypes that they could bring to market right now that have extremely wide field of view. Now, traditionally, wide field of view produced like very bulky headsets. This is the X-Tall, I think. You had to have these really wide headsets. And they would use fused lenses, where you basically had a traditional lens and then like a second lens fused to it, and you would see definite artifacts along that seam, and then you see a lot of distortion in the periphery. And that was a deal breaker for a lot of people, me included. As much as I like having the wider field of view, that distortion was really distracting. That's the Star VR there. They've gone a long way towards making it more compact. This was at Augmented World Expo last year. This was, I think, a 180-degree field of view. Once again, you'll see it as fused lenses. So you do have that line. It did not have distortion on the outside edges, but it did have a visible seam. This was me wearing it. So you can see it is a lot more compact than what we were seeing earlier. So it's a big step up. This is Boba 3, which is a prototype from Meta. And you see it is extremely thin. And really, it's a very reasonable form factor for something that's producing almost a full field of view. The different versions of it go all the way up to like around 180 degrees. I think there was one version they had that went up to 210. So they are fully capable of producing something that does this, and this is all off-the-shelf parts. All the difficult stuff that they solved was optical. Getting the lenses to produce this. And from what I've heard from people who've tried it, it is much like the Quest 3 lens. It is tack sharp all the way out to about a millimeter from the edge. We get like a little thin line of distortion, but it's not super noticeable. This probably is going to be hard to see, but somebody hit the light. There we go. You can see Quest 3 versus Boba 3 as far as the field of view. It'll kind of toggle back and forth between the two. So you can see, a significant, and this is actually getting cut off at the edge. The field of view is actually extending beyond the screen here. So, Quest 3 versus Boba 3. So the only thing holding this back from being something they can bring to market is mobile headsets cannot push this many pixels. It's just too demanding. Though the more you extend your field of view, as it extends out, the number of pixels grows geometrically. It's not linear. So every degree you go out dramatically increases the amount of rendering you have to do. So they were doing this, but hooked up to a desktop PC with a high-end graphics card. So you can see this is like the field of view. The Quest 3 is that central portion right there, all the way out to the Boba on the wider things. You can see it's a much wider field of view. This was the Boba 1, the Boba 2, and the Boba 3, dating from 2023 to 2025. So it was a 2-year span. And that's how you know that they're invested in a feature. If they keep iterating on, if they create a prototype and they go, okay, that was cool, and set it off to the side, they're probably not that invested in it. If they keep working on it to try to bring it closer and closer to something that could be marketed, they're pretty serious about this feature. So they clearly thought that the wider field of view was very compelling. And from people I've talked to that have tried it, they said, yes, it's huge, it's amazing. So we won't go into the details on it, but there's the details. You can see from the back, and look at these lenses. These lenses are huge. I mean, that is gorgeous. So the other thing that they have almost pushed all the way to production ready is varifocal. This is something they've been working on for a lot of years. There's a whole series of prototypes called Half Dome. This is something where there's two depth cues that you primarily use. One is called vergence or convergence, which is the further away something is, sort of the further apart your eyes angle, and the closer something is. If I'm looking at something right here, I actually go a little cross-eyed. My eyes angle in. VR does this just fine. If you bring something in, it puts the images in the correct spot. You do have to cross your eyes. But what normally also happens is your lens flexes to focus up close or focus further away. VR doesn't do that at all on any current headsets. And this is what you normally see. If I'm focused on this stamp right up here, then both the coffee cup and the poster are blurry. If I'm focused on the coffee cup, the stamp and the poster are blurry. If I'm focused on the poster, then the stamp and the coffee cup are blurry. And it's comfortable because your eyes are used to doing that. It's uncomfortable when you bring something close in VR because your eye wants to flex its lens because it knows that's what it should do, and when it does, everything goes blurry. So it doesn't, but it feels unreal and weird and uncomfortable for some people. So they started working on it. The first thing they tried, this was their early prototype, they had a focal surface display. They actually had these flexible surfaces that they could use to bend the light that would kind of conform to the basic shapes to give it different focal depth. There were a lot of issues with this. This didn't go very well for them. So they tried a different technique. Half Dome 1 actually had a lens on a rail that they could move the lens closer or further. What it would do is it would watch what you're looking. Okay, if I'm looking at something up close, I need to adjust that lens so that you are focusing close. And if I'm looking at something far, I move that lens out so you're focusing far away. Now, obviously, having a moving lens is not an ideal solution. It's loud, it uses a lot of energy, it's slow, it produces heat, it uses energy. It's not a great solution, but it was a proof of concept. And they liked that proof of concept enough that they went to a Half Dome 2 and a Half Dome 3. So they were pretty serious about bringing this to market, I think. The problem is, in order for this to work, you have to have really, really high quality eye tracking. So you can see there's Half Dome 1, Half Dome 2, and Half Dome 3. And that Half Dome 3 is super compact right there. They have managed, the varifocal aspect of it has absolutely no moving parts. It's all layered liquid crystals. And they're liquid crystals that actually, rather than adjusting brightness or darkness, they flex. And if you stack them, then you can adjust. Well, you see, here's one, this is Half Dome 1, and you can see the lens moving back and forth there. It's just physically moving the lens. But this, you have a series of liquid crystals that are stacked, and each of them is a power of 2 higher on the thing. So it's like binary. You can, yes, that's exactly it. So with this, you can have 128 different levels of depth. And if you put another one on there, you can have 256 levels of depth. They get to choose how many they want. And I think they decided 128 was the right number. So this allows you to focus in or focus out on something. Everything else gets blurry, and your eye is comfortable because it's focusing at the right depth. We see a lot of references to varifocal in the drivers. So they are clearly doing a lot of work with this outside of just the interior of the lab. These are the shipping drivers. So there's reasons to think they want to bring it to market, but we know they can't bring it to market until they get really high quality eye tracking. So that's one of the reasons. The other thing that we've seen that I didn't put a slide in here is the internal code names for the low end and high end Quest 4 were Pismo High and Pismo Low. And there was a company in San Francisco that was asking for people to come in and test eye tracking in VR. And when you clicked through the link, it said Pismo High on the link, which made you think they're probably doing the testing for Meta. So, I mean, there's no guarantees until you bring something to market, but clearly they would like to have high-end eye tracking in the Quest 4. Other thing is, they would love to have support for codec avatars. Of course, you would love to have photoreal people so that you're sitting there with friends or family and it looks like they're there in the space with you. That is holy grail for them. They desperately want it. And they've been working on it for about 10 years. And when they did their first codec avatars, this was like the very first one, they said it would take about 10 miracles to bring it to market. There were 10 things that they just legitimately did not know how to do. And they said the trick with miracles is they could happen tomorrow, they could happen 5 years from now, they could happen never. And that's the thing. It's like, okay, there's 10 things we don't even know if we will ever get that we have to do. And about 3 years ago, I'll kind of go through a little bit of it. They asked them how many miracles left. They said 5. And we asked them again this year, and they said 3. So they're getting close. A lot of stuff that they thought was going to be impossible to get past have gotten past. One of the things was, it used to be you had to have this array of, I think it was 1,024 DSLR cameras. And you went in and you spent like 15 minutes making different expressions and poses, and it captured it, and then they sent it to a mainframe and it chewed on it for hours to produce this profile. That's hard. You don't want everybody to have to come to a facility to get scanned in. And they have gotten past that, and you can do the scan now entirely with your phone. At least for the facial part. The body part, I don't think they've gotten past that yet. And so it takes it, and you've got kind of your basic surface, and it texture maps it. So even though you're wearing the headset, they see you without the headset. And you might say that looks waxed and fake, but it turns out it looks just like Mark Zuckerberg. So that's just how he looks. And you can, in fact, puppeteer different faces. And there's obviously huge privacy concerns and scam concerns with that. The very first day that I had the Apple Vision Pro, they had not yet locked it down so that when you captured your persona, someone else couldn't use it. And so my younger son scanned himself in and he did this, and I put on the headset, and I looked in the mirror, and I saw his face looking back, making all the same expressions I was. And it was simultaneously the creepiest and coolest thing I'd ever experienced because it was so real. I invested in the face. I'm like, whoa, I am my son. This is really weird. I'm making all these faces and everything and so on. So they locked it down like 24 hours a day, or so like it did a retina scan, and unless it was the same scan as the person who scanned it in, they wouldn't let you do it. But for like 24 hours, that was like the coolest demo ever. But yeah, you can use it to drive anything. And so here's full body codec avatars. Now this is the thing. Up until last year, it took 2 top-of-the-line NVIDIA desktop graphics cards to render these things at frame rate. This year, they can run 3 codec avatars on a Quest 3 and hit frame rate. So that was one of your miracles. I know part of it is they shifted to Gaussian splats for rendering. That was at least a part of the secret sauce. I'm not positive. There is a non-zero chance that the way they're doing this is cloud rendering, because the hyperscapes are Gaussian splats that are being cloud rendered. They could be cloud rendering these things and just streaming them down. And that would probably be the cheapest way to do it as far as the hardware. It would be very clever too, but I don't know. They haven't fessed up to how they're doing that yet. I would really like them to release a demo so that we could try it. They are asking for volunteers to train codec avatars. They're trying to build up a data set. If you were in the Pittsburgh area anytime this month or next month, they will pay you $50 an hour to go in and make faces. Sounds like good money to me, I'm in. But unfortunately, you have to be in the Pittsburgh area. So, but the cool thing is, once you get the base capture, they can do things like give you different hairstyles or different clothing or what have you once you get the base capture. And you can see like here they're actually animating like to different hairstyles on the same codec avatar. At least on one prototype, they actually had custom silicon. They actually built a codec avatar chip, a neural networking chip to render it. And it's entirely possible that that could be a differentiator between like the low-end Quest 4 and the high-end Quest 4s. This one has an accelerator on it, so you get codec avatars. I don't know though, because if they're rendering it just straight up on a Quest 3, or if they're really rendering it in the cloud, you don't need that. So we'll see. Long shots, these are the things that it would be really cool, but probably won't happen. These do become more likely if they decide to push it further out. There's no guarantee they'll ship in 2027. I mean, until they announce it, we don't know. But that is currently the plan. But they could have significantly, radically better screens. They have said that high brightness is extremely compelling in there. And there was a prototype called Starburst that produced 20,000 nits of brightness. I'm fairly certain that you could like smell bacon as your retina sizzled. But if you want to look directly at the sun in VR, you can do it. People who tried it said it was really good. But you'll also notice it had these handles because there's giant heat sinks and fans on it because it produces so much heat that you had to like hold it up. I think it weighed about 25 pounds. Retina level resolution. Obviously, it would be lovely to have, visuals that were indistinguishable from the real world. People have been playing with this for a while. Vario were kind of the ones that were really pushing this. They had a micro display that they projected on top of a regular display. So in the center of your display, you had retina resolution, and then kind of the outside was regular. But they're like $7,000, $8,000, $10,000 headsets, depending on the model. Meta produced a prototype. They had a couple, like Butterscotch was one earlier on, but the latest one's Tiramisu. It's like the series here. And you can see it is clunky. It's a big chunk of hardware. And the way they got the resolution up, and the resolution that we care about is pixels per degree, basically. If people start quoting, oh, it's got 4K screens. Well, like, yeah, well, across how many degrees? It matters. If you double the number of degrees, you've halved your effective resolution. But they basically took a 4K screen and then they squeezed it down to about a 50-degree field of view. And it allowed them to see, well, what would it be like if we were able to produce this? And you can see, this is a Rift, this is a Quest 2, this was Butterscotch, was a precursor to Tiramisu. Butterscotch got you up to about 2020 vision. Tiramisu got you up to 2010. And they said there are a lot of people who have better than 2020 vision, and for them it makes a difference. Also, you have different levels of graphical fidelity as you get out from the center because you've got more bend from the lens and you're having to mathematically compensate for that. So overshooting actually gets you higher quality on the periphery. Barrel distortion and pincushion distortion, that's how you wrap it out. So this is like the Quest 3 optical stack. This was the Tiramisu 1 optical stack. And you can see there's some thick lenses in here, and there's a lot of lenses in here. This is a thick optical stack. But I think I've got a slide that's got Tiramisu 2, which is coming up, and it's a much thinner optical stack. Yeah, here, Tiramisu 2. And it's still got a lot of elements to it, but they're all thin. So they are making good progress on it. And the fact that you see a Tiramisu 2 means they're serious about this feature. This is one they want to bring to market. So, exceptional pass-through. They would love it to be so that you put the headset on and you can't even tell that anything looks different than when you have the headset off. That's what you ideally want. There's a lot of technical challenges to this. There was a prototype that they demoed at, I've forgotten which conference, but Flamera is the name, is flat camera portmanteau. Although I kind of think it looks like fly eyes, so that's my association. You've got all these little lenses angling, stuff down, and because it knows which direction you're looking with eye tracking, it can actually pull from the correct lens so that you get the same distortion you would get if you were actually looking in that direction. The other thing is you want those cameras to be as close to your eyes as possible because the further away you get, the more disparity there is. So they moved all of the processing and hardware to the sides. The only thing you have in front of you are lenses, cameras, screens. That's it. So that's the direction they went with that. And people who've tried it, they made a lot of trade-offs to make it work, but they said the distortion was non-existent. Everything really looked perfect. Or they could move to a completely novel display tech. Highly unlikely for this version, but this is something they're still playing with a lot. They've been partnering with a lot of universities to do things like holographic displays and so on, like really novel tech, because they're trying to find ways to solve all of these different problems. They want a thin, lightweight form factor with extremely high resolution, low distortion, all these things. This is a waveguide holography display that they showed off last month that does some really unique things. I talked about it a little bit at the last meetup. You see how thin it is. I think it's 3 millimeters thick. And it does not have the vergence accommodation conflict, that difference between your vergence and your accommodation that you have on normal things. So this just automatically solves that. They don't even have to do anything to solve it. It uses a different type of waveguide than you normally do. And it's one that doesn't generally get used because it generally has a lot of chromatic aberration. That's generally how it looks over there. It's one of those things that it's kind of neat mathematically, but nobody actually uses it. And they got to thinking, well, much the same way that VR headsets compensate for the distortion of the lens, we could compensate for the distortion of the waveguide. So let's just run a bunch of profile images through it, train up a neural network, and have it apply adjustments to the color to clean it up. And they were able to do it. So they weren't able to do it for a full field of view, but I think they got it up to, what was it? They moved it up to 38-degree field of view, which was up from 23 degrees 2 years ago. So you still got a ways to go for full field of view, but they're making progress. And the last thing potentially is body tracking, because right now you get good tracking for the head, for the hands. They're starting to get good upper body tracking. They can infer like the joints as far as your elbow and your shoulder, but the rest of your body, they're mostly either guessing or just not rendering at all. Traditionally, there's like optical tracking methods like OptiTrack, or you can use like the Vive tracking puck. But nobody really wants to strap a bunch of trackers to their body or wear a special suit. That's just not practical for most people. For a while, they actually played with working in front of a mirror and just doing it all optically, but there's some obvious drawbacks to that, and they didn't end up going that direction very far. But there are apps on your phone where you can set your phone up to look at you, and it will actually do the body tracking and pass it into like VR chat. So if they are willing to have like an element you could undock from the headset and set down in front of you for the times you needed body tracking, you could 100% do it. There's no technical reason you can't. So if that's something they got serious about, they could. Now, Bosworth has gone on the record saying he doesn't think that there's enough interest in that to go that direction at the moment. But he says he's happy to be proven wrong, and if he is proven wrong, they know how to go in that direction. So.
Eric, have you heard anything else about them possibly using the cameras on the controllers?
No, they did a part, I think it was Stanford they worked with. With the Quest Pro controllers, you've got cameras on the controllers looking outward, and you could use those cameras for body tracking. I think they used like a Quest 2, but they strapped some cameras to it when they were doing the test. That worked better than it had any right to, really. But with them moving more and more towards like bare hand tracking and so on, I think they're a little hesitant to go that direction. Plus, it's just you get really good tracking sometimes, and then if you move your hand in some place that it can't see your body, then you lose the tracking. So there's that. I think you're going to see the first real AR glasses, something like the Orion prototype, in the 2027 to 2028 timeframe. That's kind of about where they're aiming right now. They showed off the Orion prototype at last year's Connect. Why is that not showing up? But you can see it. They look more or less like regular glasses. I mean, the frames are a little chunky, but they're not too bad. I mean, if you look at like the Snap spectacles, these are like significantly better.
Air Force birth control class.
There you go, right.
You can't get a date when you're wearing those.
You can see there is a little bit of light leakage, so you can tell that there's a display there, but it's fairly subtle. But if you look at the wristband, they're using the same sort of electromyographic wristband that they were. So this is from the side. Again, not bad. It's got a 70-degree field of view, which from a VR point of view is pretty narrow, but from an AR point of view is huge. That has been traditionally very, very challenging to widen your field of view out to that point. And that's because the waveguides you've got, all the light comes straight out from it. And the further you get from the center, the more off angle it is when it hits your eyes and the more distortion you get. What you need is a material with a very high angle of refraction. And they figured out what is the one that has the highest angle of refraction that we can reasonably produce. And it was optical grade silicon carbide. Nobody produces optical grade silicon carbide, but they did in some small batches. And they said that it would cost about $10,000 per pair of glasses to produce them like this. So obviously that's not practical at the moment, but it did work. So people were testing them out, and everyone I talked to that tested them said they were phenomenal. You had a pretty wide field of view. You had stereo correct stuff in the real world. I mean, these are what you've been promised. These are the AR glasses that everybody wants. And they did a lot of it by moving everything onto a computing puck with a battery. So the headset is trying to just be displays and sensors, and everything's being done wirelessly. So you just drop the puck in your pocket or a purse or what have you. It's a very clever solution. But I mean, it can do the stuff that they talked about with like the live AI, where it can look and identify things, and it's like, okay, I'm looking at all the stuff in your refrigerator. I know what it all is. I know what you're missing, so I can make your grocery list, things like that. And of course, if they have a multiplayer experience, you can have shared objects that you're all seeing with the same glasses. Could go with novel display tech to avoid the whole optical grade silicon carbide. If you used some of these holographic displays, it could bypass that need. So there's a number of ones they've been trying there, like the ones we were talking about. Or they may find a way to bring down the cost of optical grade silicon carbide. And there are at least 3 companies I know of that are actively pursuing this. There's no technical reason you can't make this a production process that is consumer ready. It's just not cheap on the front end to develop this technique. So that will probably be it. So this is a chunk, that's a probably $5,000 chunk of optical grade silicon carbide right there. So if they can bring that down to a reasonable price, then that may be a viable choice. All this I will throw is something called Hofstadter's law that Michael Abrash always quotes, is it always takes longer than you expect, even when you take into account Hofstadter's law. And so all of these things that you see, we want them to land on these targets. We want them as soon as we can possibly have them. But in general, it always takes longer than you think. So that's all I got. Anybody have questions? No? Okay. Thank you. Yeah.
Yeah, what I meant earlier with the Quest question is,
Yeah.
like we're seeing the Ray-Bans like come out as
Yeah.
soon as they can possibly put them out, but it seems like so much time between the Quest 3S and the Quest 4, so I'm just wondering why aren't they throwing little things out there like battery improvements, maybe like a version with just the eye tracking or just the mouth tracking and stuff like that.
They've really tried to aim for a console type update schedule. And a lot of the reason for that is so that developers that are building things on multi-year timelines, they have a fixed target that they know they can go for. They could certainly do. I mean, essentially, there's a few minor things on the Quest 3S. Even though it's the lower end headset, it has 3 or 4 features the Quest 3 doesn't have because it was a year later. They figured they might as well fold them in. Like there's a little sensor that'll pick up the flicker on fluorescence and will adjust the shutter on the camera to avoid the flicker. It's a nice touch. Lots of little things like that. So they could do little incremental updates, but I think they want to. Plus, you get the economy of scale of the longer you're producing in a completely identical thing, the lower the cost comes down. So they want a stable target for developers, and they want to bring the cost down. Because they typically sell either at or below cost when they launch and make it all up on their cut of the software. But by the end of the life cycle, they are actually making profit on the original headset. So if they can make it live a little longer, and that may be yet another reason they pushed an extra year out for the Quest 3 was, yeah, let's actually earn a little money off the headset as opposed to just off the software. So that's a factor in there. So I always want something newer and better, and I always get really excited when I see all these features in the prototypes in the lab. I'm like, I want that now. But I get that they try to strike a balance. And originally, I mean, there was talk of going out to like a 5 or 7 year cadence, much like some of the major consoles when they first started. And then going from the Quest 1 to Quest 2, it was actually less than a year. And that was because it turns out the Quest 1 was way more popular than they expected it to be, but the techniques they were using to build it didn't scale. They couldn't produce them any faster than they were producing them. And so they actually had to scrap it and like create the Quest 2 within a year to create a model that could actually be mass produced. So we actually got lucky there. We got like a big jump in 1 year, and then you got more of like a 3 or 4 year cadence on going to the 3, and this is probably gonna be even a little bit longer going into this one. So, but it allows them to wrap in, a whole generational change when they do, instead of just being incremental. All right, well, if anybody has any questions, oh yes.
Can you pull up the Houston VR website?
I probably can, yes.
Since we're all here in one room, we might as well show off. We have a calendar on right now.
Ah, yes.
The very bottom of
Let's
the
see.
homepage.
That'll be-
VR.com or Houston Excel?
You can either go to HoustonVR.com or HoustonXR.org. HoustonXR.com was unfortunately taken, but HoustonXR.org is ours. So either one will work. But yeah, here's the website. And events. I think there's the calendar down there, and we're going to start posting events on that. So, and if you click on those, you can actually add them to your Google Calendar, so you get reminders.
They should probably make that calendar public. So.
Yes, Jake is doing all the heavy lifting on this, so thank you very much for overhauling the website and getting it a lot more functional.
Well, you're welcome. But for currently myself and hopefully soon to be the public, you should be able to view all of the events that we have planned going on there and where they are, when they are, and you can even download the calendar so you can add it to your own Google Calendar or Apple Calendar, and it'll pop up automatically on your calendar application.
And this is increasingly important because also it looks like it's possible that next month we may actually be hosting at Audi International School. They've been working really, really hard to try to get us out there, so we may go out there and do a test run there. They're really bending over backwards on that front. Also, I mean, there's some things we're planning to do. We're going to open it up so that we can publish articles on there and reviews. So anybody who wants to review software or review hardware, let us know. We can give you access so that you can post things. If you want to research something and write an article, by all means, we should do that. So, and as always, I mean, we've had, Jake's come up and talked, Ted's come up and talked. If you have something you're passionate about, you're interested in, you're either experimenting with personally or you're just interested in and want to research and you want to come and share that, please do. Let me know. I don't like being the only person up here talking. I always try to have a guest speaker and I like to have other people up here as well, but this month it just didn't work out. But if you have, and we do show and tell. If you've got a project you're building, come show what you're doing, and we'd love to see what you're up to. But if you'd like to write for us and get up on the web, please do. Also, we are capturing these things thanks to yet another Jake. There's a lot of Jakes here. I don't know what it is about the name Jake in VR, but thanks to Jake and his filming and his editing, we are up on YouTube. And so if you miss one or you want to go back and reference it, it's available online now. So thank you to Jake for that. All right.
Oh, also, since we are transitioning over to our new identity as Houston XR versus Houston VR, we're thinking of doing a logo redesign competition.
Mhm.
So the details of that will still be to be determined, but just get the creative juices flowing and be thinking about it. We will be competing for who can come up with the best Houston XR logo, as to be judged by the Shadow Council.
And if you land it, it'll be on T-shirts, and we'll probably silk screen it onto. Speaking of, Mace Virtual Labs went out of business. They did an auction. I picked up an embarrassing number of these cases for a very, very reasonable price. So if anybody wants the case, put your name on a slip, fold it, drop it in here, and here in about 10 minutes or 5 minutes, we'll draw a name out of the hat and you can take it home. So not as exciting as the $500 hardware we gave away last time, but it's a case. It's a nice case. So thank you all for coming out, and we will see you next month. Here, we're gonna mix these up.
Put 3 of them in there?
There's 4, I think. Let's see. Ted. Yay! It's got the big glass. It is your shiny new case.
Maybe it can replace our camera.